Welcome to the latest episode of High Output AI, where Tom and Elliot talk AI and the tools and technologies that make AI happen. 3, 2, 1. Ooh, that was hard to do one-handed. All right, let's hope we're recording this all correctly. Welcome to episode 23, also still starring Pup, who is a little bit restless because it's starting to warm up. Yeah,
I got my summer pants on today. Couldn't do jeans.
And I got jeans on.
It's winter over there.
Yes, well over here it's winter.
Yeah.
All right, man. Let's do the usuals. Hello to all our new subscribers. It's nice to see those numbers growing. If you are listening on YouTube, do subscribe. We put out a bunch of videos. We're probably due to put out a few more non-potty videos.
Yeah. There's another couple coming out.
If you're listening elsewhere, subscribe, keep listening. I think iTunes has reviews, so leave one there. It helps. But I guess overall, the reason we want you to do all of this sort of stuff is just so more people hear about the show. So maybe the simplest summary here is like, if you like this show, just tell another person about it. Rather than rely on these weird algorithms that we need to gamify in order to get our name out there. So send it on. As always, you can reach us on Twitter. We now have a Discord. It's literally just Tom and myself as of the time of recording, but we figured we'd start with just us and fill some people in. So if you're interested in AI content, hit us up on there.
We do a lot of preparation for the show on the Discord. We're doing it live. We're doing it in the open. We want this to be an open, collaborative process, so you can see how my brain works. So it's not just this polished image that you get right now.
Yeah, this high quality,
top tier
James Cameron style production. Yeah, very good.
We got to talk about what we're drinking. What are we drinking?
Well, we got Suntory Double Lemons, which are shochu vodka soda with lemon in them.
It's negative 196 degrees.
Yeah, apparently they blast freeze the lemons and then crush them into a powder. And
isn't that below Kelvin?
No.
What's Kelvin? 296. 296.
Yeah,
sorry. It's close to 300. Sorry. Still, that's colder than LNG.
It's quite cold,
Yeah.
But they're low calorie, so I like them.
They're 6% as well, so we're going to be...
we'll stick to 1 because we both have social events on this
I'm going to go see my grandma. Take one for it. So, holy crap, we got a lot to speak about this week.
Yeah,
we're not going to fit it all in.
Yeah.
There's so much.
We might need to blast through a couple of topics. It's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, unlike last episode, which was very much around seed rounds, and the episode before, which was very much around Tesla, this one's a bunch of different things. Mixing it up.
So we're splitting this one up to news that we've been following over the last couple of weeks, last couple of months, and just a little bit of update on there and stuff that we've come across. And some new stuff as well. We're going to be chatting about some energy and the energy consumption. We're going to talk about Meta and what its shareholders want for AI. And we're also going to be talking about a blueprint for AI rights, an AI Bill of Rights out of the US, which is all exciting stuff. So we'll jump into it first with the continuing news from last week. So first off, we're going to jump into the world of AI prose, written AI, and tweets. Last week we mentioned something called Moonbeam. It was in the show notes from last week, and it was about and we also covered a lot on Jasper, which was automated written content for marketing. We came across 2 or 3 other tools this week as well. I should have mentioned as well as this is also off the back of Ali Abdaal's tweet, which was very successful. Elliot has just spilled
drink on the microphone.
And himself.
Yeah, well, yeah.
You're replaceable. The microphone isn't.
Well, I'm more...
You're easier to deepfake.
Yeah, less susceptible to water damage than the microphone, I would say, if we had to summarize that. But it appears to be fine. It was just on the boom arm. Yeah. This is me trying to position the microphone in a place so it doesn't just rotate and slide over there and have terrible audio.
Well, I can't speak now because Midas is on my lap and just panting in the microphone. So you take over and tee up this AI prose.
Yeah, cool. So there's a bunch of these tools out now which are we'll make AI generated Twitter content for you. Some of them are themed. Some of them you write a bit. It'll help you write a bit. But it all kind of falls into this general category of you want lots of followers and engagement on Twitter.
Yeah.
Pay us money and we'll do the hard work for you. Which, okay, sure. I mean, I think it's the one that we had a look at here. The second one, it's $50 or $99 a month for this, and it's we'll post 100 tweets a day. And given that today, which is the 28th here in Australia, 27th in the US, at the moment, Twitter now has a new owner.
Yep.
Officially, Mr. Musk.
Did you see the video of him walking into the HQ?
With the sink. It's so lame. Apparently fired the CEO today.
Wow.
And a bunch of other people. But anyway, it'll be interesting to see, given how much of his dialogue around wanting to get out of the deal was about miscommunicating the number of bots, how these tools are going to land on Twitter in the future. Because to me, this is just crap content. Like, it's just noise. Twitter used to be, I don't want to be one of those people like, back in my day, Twitter was way better. But
you're about to be.
It used to be a lot more signal, because I think in the earlier days, people didn't have this notion that like somehow you were going to get rich because you had a bunch of Twitter followers. So people just talked about weird stuff and stuff that they were super into, and it was cool. And now it's like, it's basically LinkedIn, but in tweet thread form for like 90% of content. It's like,
It will soon be unusable because there is going to be so much drivel in there that is not original, repetitive, and just frankly too much stuff. Like,
100%.
If me, who produced about 1 tweet per month before this tool, can suddenly up my quantity to 100 tweets per day without too much thinking, that just can't be good for the engagement metrics of Twitter.
Yeah, absolutely. And how are these tools going to have a sustainable business model if that's the case? Like, initially, they're probably going to get a bunch of views, but like, you'd think at some point, if you were selling one of these tools and you had 100,000 users, you would probably just make all of those 100,000 users view and engage with the other tweets so that you could make the metrics look bigger. But look, we'll see. I mean, the thing that annoys me the most on Twitter at the moment is like people post a thread and then you see all those comments, which is like, read wise, save thread.
Yeah.
It's just like 400 replies that say the exact same thing.
Read wise,
it's like,
save thread.
Wow, what a great, Readwise is a great tool. There's a bunch of other ones, Notion and Memit or something, that all do the same sort of thing. But I mean, I don't know. It's real dumb. Like, imagine if you were listening to somebody talk in a public forum and you were just sitting in the audience going, Readwise, save thread.
Well, the town square analogy is now that instead of the individual person standing on the box or 2 or 3 people in the square yelling their opinions and attracting followers based on the merit of their thoughts and their articulation of their position, is now just going to be thousands of crazy people running around screaming from the top of their lungs saying, Readwise!
Readwise. Yeah.
But what I wanted to talk about here is that what I find interesting is, so there's 3 tools that we've come across: Moonbeam, Lex, and now this new one, which is called Tweet Hunter. And they're all on the idea of helping you write and get through the block and produce more. And I wonder what...
Allegedly.
Elliot had a very skeptical face.
It's spam generation as a service, basically.
Yeah. What I think is going to be interesting, though, is that this idea of the assistant in these spaces, and especially in the long-form world of, helping you work through the writer's block, helping you create things that might be a little bit more mundane in the written creation world, and whether there is a space in the world that is non-spammy for AI assistants. Obviously, like, for example, when authors are writing, they have research assistants, they have editing assistants and things like that. And whether they're... I'm just trying to grab something positive from this here. Jump in and save me, mate. Jump in and save me.
I don't think there's no position in the world for this. Like, it's fine. There was an analogy that was on Cal Newport, which Cal Newport got from somewhere else, which was about children's television in the 90s. And originally, children's television was like Sesame Street, and it was kind of clever, quite educational. There was jokes in there for adults that were watching. Like, it was high quality content. And then the counter movement to that was Blue's Clues and Teletubbies, which was somebody had engineered exactly the type of colors.
Oh, there we go. It was bound to happen. Yeah, good.
Well, anyway, we'll cut that out.
Probably not.
Probably not, no. Yeah, and then it was Blue's Clues and Teletubbies, which was like somebody worked out that if you put like high contrast primary colors on the screen and like make these weird high pitched noises and
put a baby in
say things over and over again, kids are more engaged with that kind of content. But like objectively, it was less educational. Let's, less of the stuff that I think we care about a lot. Like you think about Andrew Huberman's podcast, for example, or Cal Newport or any of the others. It's like I did a lot of deep research on some scientific topics, and I'm going to present them to you in a interesting and engaging way. That takes real work. I don't think these tools would be good at this. If your podcast is like 5 hot tips to save money this summer, yeah, people have said that shit enough that like, yeah, we could make some tweets around this. And I think we're going to see a lot of that, but we're not going to see a lot. We haven't yet seen the like, hi, I'm a Twitter bot that reads literally every paper that comes out in a week, summarizes it, gets an understanding, pick a topic you're interested in, and I'll summarize some research papers.
Did you see that thing on Hacker News this week, which was like AI, you can create AI characters, and someone created a Socrates, and you can have a chat with these characters. You can create characters from history, fantasy, whatever it is, and you can have a chat with them, and someone created Socrates and asked them about Bolsonaro in Brazil. And they said, what is your opinion on Bolsonaro? And Socrates, the AI, wrote this little piece on how it was very factual. It was very factual, like popular, right-wing.
I did see this, yeah.
Yeah. And then it said, how would you feel about Bolsonaro? Or what do you think about Bolsonaro? And it responded with, look, I believe, I don't, and they avoided the AI avoided the question directly and just said that, like, I believe in people being able to vote for who they want to or something like that. And it was just this, like, at first I was like, wow, this is amazing. Look at this AI forming these opinions. And then I spent a little bit of time thinking about it and, I don't know, showed someone about it. And then I came back to it and I was like, hang on, this is just like, this isn't original thinking. This is just nicely written prose, like facts written in nicely written prose. Packaged in nicely written prose.
Yeah, 100%. And like, it's going to be derivative, like highly derivative. And I struggle to think, like obviously Socrates and how do you say his name? Boleros? Is that the other person you said?
Oh, Bolsonaro,
sorry.
I was thinking of Archimedes.
I mean, they lived at extremely different times, so they never had any kind. Well, I mean, he might have thought of Socrates, sure, but Socrates doesn't know this bloke, and we can do our best to guess, but like, I think we've got to remember to a certain extent, like, with the tools that we have today, it's not real. It's like a very good facade. It's like stage magic, like it's good and it's entertaining and it's very cool. But there's no magic at the end of the day. We haven't yet reached the point where it's like, look, we can probably mimic and somehow test how we've mimicked Socrates in such a way that like this is logically consistent with like how he would behave on brand new ideas. I think we're at the point where it's like someone can talk like Socrates the same way that you might do a parody of Socrates.
Yeah. I also have no idea how Socrates spoke. And
no
one does.
Nobody does.
But I think what we're saying here is what we said last week over and over again, which is like, this isn't going to generate original thinking. This is going to generate large quantities of second and third derivative opinions. It's unlikely, and just to some extent maybe some first derivative opinions, but it's really not going to create the original stuff. And we're going to see an explosion in that area, and we're going to tune it out either by leaving platforms or looking for platforms or simply just tuning out the second derivative, third derivative nonsense. And like we already do when humans repackage Paul Graham essays 500 times on Twitter. And we're going to be, and it's going to pay better to think originally.
I mean, that's my hope anyway.
Oh no, what's he eating?
He's still trying to lick the carpet.
Yeah, that's fair. It's a tasty drink.
Yeah, not for pups.
Not for pups.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we've beaten this topic with a dead horse, and we're repeating ourselves from last week like an AI.
Yeah. Sorry. The point I was going to make there is like, there is versions of like, what would Socrates say about X that can be highly informative and highly interesting, which is like, hey, I'm a historian. I've been studying Socrates for a long time. here's the evidence about why I think Socrates would react this way to this, current political drama that's happening in the world. If we can get AI to do that, pull up evidence, give some reasoned, logical thought about why it's doing what it's doing, that'd be amazing. I would read that. I would listen to that. It's verifiable, traceable dialogue or criticism. Whereas right now, what I think we have is like, I can do a really good Socrates impression. You want to see it? And then that's it. You know what I mean?
This reminds me of, and speaking of second derivatives, from the Lex Friedman Balaji interview. Balaji brought up, Balaji, sorry, mispronouncing his name, brought up this New Yorker article, I think it was, from the 90s, which was historians looking back on from the 3000s to the early 90s, writing about Queen Brittany and how she was worshipped by women across the world, and this idea of looking back on history in a kind of incorrect way because you're missing some of the facts as you're like pulling through the rubble, but you're still able to paste some things through. And it's just obviously how we like our vision, our interpretation of Socrates is definitely missing a lot of the facts that made him up as a human being.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, like, who knows? We could one day find out that this dude was just like perpetually 8 wines deep, and this is just his like drunken rambles.
And he had the equivalent of tweet hunter in ancient Greece, and was just very good at getting his tweets out there.
Just a bunch of young scholars which will like just throw some words together and be like, yeah, I bet I can get him to say this. But yes, look, I won't be signing up for one of these services anytime soon.
Yeah.
And I think
they're at risk of getting banned from Twitter as well.
With
the new bus at the hill.
Hell, I'd ban them. They're stupid. But yeah, anyway, enough on that topic. What's next?
So we're going to jump into Shutterstock selling AI-generated images. We mentioned this probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we're talking about how they'd made a stand not to. And
well, so I think the nuance here is they banned other people from generating and selling images generated by AI on their platform.
Yep.
And now they've partnered with DALL-E to sell AI-generated images on their platform, which I think was...
That was one of our things.
One of the reasons we said
one of our hot takes is they've got to get into this space.
Now, the narrative they are presenting is that they know that DALL-E was trained with a large amount of Shutterstock content, which it was, like verifiably it was. And they would like to reimburse those artists for any derivative works that come out the other side of DALL-E, based on the proportion of that original artist's work that was in the DALL-E training set. And the narrative they have on other AI-generated content is they wouldn't be able to know how to pay the other creators based on not knowing the provenance of my Stable Diffusion image that's been trained on everything but Shutterstock. I find that a little hard to believe. The other thing is like this whole we're going to pay the original people in proportion to how much their data was in the training set. It just feels like something that sounds good on the surface, but it will very quickly dissipate, and it will last exactly one generation of Shutterstock contributors. Until
all of the Shutterstock contributors were previous AI-generated images.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if I became a full-time photographer or digital artist, signed up to Shutterstock today and started putting my works up there, do I have to wait for DALL-E 3 before I see a cent of that?
Yeah, and literally only a cent. That's all you're going to see as well.
Yeah, and will this deal continue beyond this first thing? Is it just a way to calm everybody down, or is it a legitimate business model of this going forward? And I
think it's a legitimate business model for Shutterstock, but I think the creators are getting screwed.
Yeah, 100%. And they're going to continue to get screwed more and more, the more images that go into these models. I mean, we're seeing large language models and imaging models be trained on more and more and more and more data. If you sell an image on Shutterstock for $1, how are you going to split $1 between 1 million training photos?
But what I find interesting, exactly, like this is going to not be worth the paper that it's written on some of these check sizes.
Yeah, and I think I mean, I love Spotify, but I think we're seeing similar trends in music streaming, which is like you have to get an ungodly amount of streams to get paid $1 out of Spotify.
Yep.
I think people are eventually going to get sick of that. And like, I think the Spotify difference is that, hey, it helps promote my band. And if I'm on tour, it's like, oh yeah, I've been listening to so-and-so on Spotify. So
People
I'll go
follow
see
bands, not photographers, nearly as much.
Yeah. And especially not AI generated photographers. Nobody's going to be like, oh man, what a sick picture of a policeman riding a unicorn chasing 6 squirrels with machine guns. I want to know which artists' photos contributed to the model that generated this so I can proportionally follow them and support them as individual artists. Like, it's just too many cognitive leaps.
Yeah. Do you think we will see this in music then? Like, as in creation of like AI generated music? Do you think we'll ever get to that? I'm pretty skeptical because I think people follow people, not.
Yeah, I mean, I think music's hard. Like, if you're talking lo-fi hip hop to study and relax to, like, can we make that on AI? Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
But like genuine,
Or the neural beats or whatever it is, where it's just like. Whoa, 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 whoa,
yeah.
whoa, whoa.
I mean, that stuff's good. Brain.fm, that's pretty dope. I'm a paid subscriber to that. But
Not a sponsor yet.
no, we have no sponsors at this point in time. What was I saying? Yeah, I think we were talking about this in the car the other day. So Tom and I drove up to the coast for a little swim and to see an old mate, and we were talking about why image generation AI seems to be the hotness at the moment. Where like GPT-3 and stuff took a little bit longer to get into the zeitgeist, and I think my hypothesis is that like an image can be 95% correct in a lot of ways. And most people will be like, wow, that's great art. It's art. Any error is attributable to artistic stylization. Whereas if you make a song and like 3/4 of the way through, it just turns to like full volume screeching static for even 1 second and then goes back to like a nice beat, that song is going to be immediately crap.
Yeah, but I think that's. You could say the same thing with images, right? Where you could be like, oh, if you just put a black hole in the middle of your landscape, that would, like a black crack or something, then that would be bad art, and people would be like, oh, that's weird.
Yeah, I just think how like visual tuning to a lot of the types of errors. Like obviously, yeah, these are extreme ones, but like okay, let's say.
But the example that we talked about in the car, I mean in the office when we were being very productive and not driving to the coast on a weekday for a swim. Shh, Elliot, we've got to keep up the proverb.
We don't. We had a day off and we had a swim.
No, what we were originally talking about is that like the reason why it started in art is because there's like so much more bandwidth for error, because error can be considered like can be a feature, not a bug. Whereas as soon as you get into a world of much more prescription and much more specificity required, the bandwidth for error reduces. So this is why we're talking about, look, we're going to be creating artwork from this, but we're unlikely to be creating architectural layout drawings for construction very soon, or PCB layouts for manufacturing.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And like if we needed to make text to fill a lorem ipsum placeholder on Figma,
Yep.
I'm sure anything would be fine. If we needed to make noise to like, I don't know, just fill some space, we could probably do a pretty good job of it. But I think the difference in my mind between like the audio and the text and the images, and a lot of these applications of images, is that like these images, the Shutterstock images, they're often filler. They're not the primary content. You don't go to Shutterstock, buy an image and frame it and put it on your wall. You use it to like be the header image for your blog post so that people look at it for 2 seconds and then scroll past and do the actual thing that they want to do on the page, which is read.
Yep.
I don't think the same is true for text and audio in most cases. Yeah, maybe background music for something, you could get away with it. But if you're generating like a novel for somebody to read or a podcast for somebody to listen to via AI, and it starts to be like a little bit weird and like the grammar doesn't quite work, or it's just saying like factually incorrect things, or every 8th word switches to German for some reason, because it's high focus and high, I don't know, it needs a level, exactness. people won't be able to get away with it. And as you say, like in those cases, like architectural drawings, PCB designs, and everything else, nobody's going to, like medical imaging, nobody's going to be like, what about instead of using an MRI machine, we just create some DALL-E images, which is an MRI of Elliot Smith's brain, and just use whatever it comes out with, because, you know, of course that's just as good. No, it's not fucking just as good.
Full disclosure, I literally came up with that idea in the car, and then I was like, hang on, this is a dumb idea.
Yeah, no, don't do that, people. You could do it for, let's make some more training data to pre-train a model or something, but you can't make magic.
I think what's going to happen in this space is we're going to have digital artists that are creating art based off AI with prompts, mashing it together, and we're going to be following the digital artists. We're going to have digital music creators which use AI-generated beats, is that the right word? Melodies, whatever it is, mash them together, and we're going to be following that, call it AI DJ. That's what we're going to be doing. And there is always going to, not always, there's going to be a human supervision element to a lot of this, and the tools are just going to get a little bit more useful, and you're going to have more breadth of access to these things. And the people that are going to make the money from this are the people that like are selling you the filler noises or to go in there, like the Shutterstocks of the world.
Yeah, with the exception being the Teletubbies of any of these fields.
The Teletubbies.
Yeah, like we're not going to get the Sesame Streets out of this method. We're not going to get the Andrew Huberman podcast generated by AI. It's just not going to happen. But you might get audio-visual experiences that are enough to like play in the background while you're doing work, or be a, you know, music video when there is no music video. Like it's visually appealing enough, and it's appealing enough that it's like, whatever, I'll watch this.
For
it's fine.
And clubs the cheap clubs where people don't need DJs, where they just need to like put some noise on because everyone's so wasted in it, and they just need to they'll play the AI Spotify playlist and
yeah, exactly, and just keep people going, keep them in that weird little trance. Very much in the style of was it Neuromancer or Snow Crash? I can never remember which one.
Not Snow Crash, probably Neuromancer.
Neuromancer. Yeah. Anyway.
Alrighty. Well, let's move on. What have we covered? We said we're going to tie those two well together.
Yeah. So Shutterstock, to recap on the story, Shutterstock is soon to be selling AI-generated images.
Oh, I wanted to say one thing on this, which is I think it's going to be interesting when Getty Images, which is Adobe, right?
I think so. Adobe has a stock photo thing, whichever one it is.
Yeah. When the competitor, which is Getty Images, starts doing the same thing and they start using Stable instead of DALL-E or whoever the image generation model is, supplier is, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens to the training data sets. Because if you're Getty, you're going to be like, hey, those are our images, get them the hell out of yours. And if you're Shutterstock, you're going to be like, hey, those are mine, get them the hell out of your training data set. We're going to see this like bifurcation of training data sets and models. And you're going to have the Shutterstock one, which is like optimized for, I don't know, plants, because it's got more plants in its training data set, and Getty Images doesn't. And Getty Images is going to be more to drinks. And
yeah. No, I definitely think that's possible. And it'll be an interesting time. You know, it may be that we're in a golden era where like there's enough Wild West and not enough regulation that like these models like GPT-3 or DALL-E 2 can exist.
Yep.
But 5 years from now, regulation will make them impossible. So this may be the only time in history where these are possible. I don't know if that's going to be the case. It'll be interesting to see. But like there is a future where rulings in a lot of copyright jurisdictions are you need to explicitly grant permission to use any image on the internet in a training model, and then it just becomes impossible to do it legally. Obviously, you could always do things illegally, but that's not really the point.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Good stuff. Moving on for the final bit of continuing news.
Random
Bits Canva.
Yeah. So, the random bits follow-up from last week.
Thank you for the listener pointing it out for us.
Yeah, it was Lewis.
Yeah, it was Lewis. Elliot's brother.
It was my brother, yeah. So I made this real hot bet, or what I thought was a hot bet at the time, that like Canva would have a text-to-image feature in their product in the next 18 months. It turns out it launched like 2 weeks before we recorded that episode.
So it was a hot take in your own head.
Yeah, it's actually, I was right. I hadn't known that. It is beta. It looks like it's an existing model. I'm sure they're going to double down more on AI. And the other point here was that Designer. Our other point was that can Canva beat Microsoft, who has the distribution advantage? Microsoft is releasing a AI-generated design tool called Designer, which will use DALL-E. It's on their website that it uses DALL-E because of their partnership with OpenAI, which means that all of our predictions came true. So we are the ultimate AI. And it also means we should probably do more than 2 seconds research before we come up with hot takes. But anyway.
Nah, our hottest takes are when we're three Suntories deep. And
3 Suntories deep.
But this seems like a lamer version of the browser wars, but we're in like the Microsoft Paint wars at the moment.
Yeah.
The Paint wars.
Oh, man. What's it worth? It's like $20 billion and it's the Microsoft Paint wars. I guess they're not both Microsoft Paint, are they? Yeah, I don't know. We'll see where this lands. Like, I think 20 years from now, are we going to look back on the fact that we could, like, make some clip art in an exciting way as, like, peak AI? No, probably not. This is not the pinnacle of AI's output. It's cool, and I'm sure there's a lot of value to generate along the way, but, yeah.
Speaking of peak AI, shall we move on to the new topics this week?
Yes, let's do it.
So this week, Meta's shareholders were in the news. A person called Bill Gerrity from Alt Capital, and he is a guest host on the All In podcast every now and again. And
Didn't know that.
he was the one that he was the guest last week doing the slide.
Oh, right. I didn't put those two things together. There you go.
And Alt Capital wrote a letter to Meta, and it was a letter asking Mark Zuckerberg, as CEO, an open letter asking him to really focus on turning Meta into a much more profitable business than it is, because it could be, and reducing capex, cutting a few staff here and there. But what we really cared about was told him to stop focusing on the metaverse and focus on AI.
Yeah, so, I mean, to me, if you took out the double down on AI, spend more money there statement, there's a pretty standard analysis of what I think a savvy and intelligent investor, like these folk are, would say to a company that is now a public company, which is like, we want you to increase free cash flow. The way to do that is to reduce expenses, headcount being a major one, cut back on some R&D. You're spending well too much on the metaverse. And just, shift towards generating more free cash. Because at the moment, rates are different, your valuation's down, we just need to shift business practices. It struck me as interesting that they then went and said, throw more money into this other area.
It was reduce, except AI.
Yeah.
It was the only double down on this, we believe this is the future of the company.
Yeah, and look, I mean, in all fairness, Meta produces some really fantastic cutting-edge AI research. They've built some great models. They had a model recently which, for the first time, I think, translated and transcribed a language that had no written component.
Yep.
I believe it's Hokkien.
I remember back in 2011, they had those two AIs talking to each other and they invented a new language.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, that was definitely overblown.
That was my first I remember, I think it was like, maybe it was even 2010, it was my first reading of the word AI.
Yes. But look, they do a lot of stuff in this space, which is great work. And they do have a competitive advantage here compared to somebody else. Especially given that they have distribution platforms like Instagram and things where this tech could be really useful. But yeah, I mean, these investors said, spend more on AI, double down. And we're seeing a lot of hotness in this space, Jasper, stability, everything else. So, this could be a little bit of a signal from the team there that says, look, we haven't forgotten about this space. Maybe we're not going to drop 100 million into XYZ, but we're already invested and believe this is a big part of the future. I'm sure there was a little bit of that. But yeah, I think it really goes to show that sentiment has shifted, and AI is back in the spotlight. Hopefully it doesn't just fizzle out when people get bored of text to image or text to text in the case of GPT-3, and we see a lot more investment in some of this more difficult AI. But Yeah, overall quite an interesting letter.
It's marking a changing in the winds away from the VR and the crypto world back towards AI in terms of, I dare say, cutting edge sexy topics.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's yeah.
But as you said in the Tesla day, the change this time is that it's no longer we say the word AI to improve our stock price by 6% upon an announcement. It's really boring, detailed stuff that only a few people in the world will understand, which means it's moved beyond, more than a few people, a few 100,000 people in the world will understand, which means it's moved beyond it's moved out of the world of research pet projects. It's moved out of the hype and it's moved into almost boring business as usual for these companies now.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a link in the Discord, which I don't know if it made it into the show notes, but it was from DeepMind, talking about how a number of their innovations ended up in Google Cloud, for example. And they're not, some of them are like new APIs that are available. Some of them are just like, here's how we optimize a bunch of stuff internally. And it's like,
boring.
You're not going to get 200,000 people download the VM server optimization naming protocol AI or whatever the hell it is. But it's like real business use cases like this.
Yeah, there was one which was like, we are now converting paper invoices to digital ones really, really fucking well.
Yeah.
And it was all a part of the digital transformation. Like, we sell digital transformations for big companies, which I think is super interesting because it's like, we're now at the stage where we're so boring that we could go and help the concrete manufacturing company because the AI is actually at that level.
Yeah. And I think I'm hopeful that instead of text to image, we get parameters to materials design, which is like, look, I want a new fabric. It needs to be this stretchy, but it needs to be fire retardant and, this, that, and the other. Generate some candidate polymers that meet that requirement that are also carcinogenic. That sort of generative stuff, which is then like, okay, we'll run these through actual experiments because you might have just like made up some random polymers that aren't feasible, full of uranium or whatever. I think that sort of work is exciting.
I want it to be even more boring where it's like, we're going to get rid of this form that people need to fill out.
Yeah.
Because we can now monitor this stuff ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. Sure.
I want it to be so boring that like, hey, we used to send faxes. Like, get rid of faxes in hospitals. Boring. That's kind of like the level of boring that I'm excited for.
Yeah. And I do hope that stuff comes along. And I think, to a certain extent, while a lot of the money is being put into sexy front page of, the newspaper type generative AI, putting more money into this space means that those kind of projects that will be still generating new shareholder value in 100 years can get started today. Even if DALL-E 2 is one of those things that we think, man, you remember the Super Nintendo? Remember the pictures you used to see on your Super Nintendo? Those were the days, So, we'll see.
No. So, anyway, exciting space. I might put you on the spot here, but there was a comment in here which said, while the increased AI investment clearly was well-timed, Meta's investment in the metaverse, while smaller than the AI investment, was not as well-timed. Do you know what AI investments they made, other than a couple of the models you've already mentioned?
They've spent a lot of money on different AI models in sort of the image generation space, a lot of translation stuff over the years. I'm sure that behind the scenes of a lot of their advertising optimization, there are some AI models there.
Yeah, like the similar audience stuff in there.
Yeah.
There was also something in another part of the article which made it sound like they were optimizing data centers with AI a little bit or something, or like there was like some form of infrastructure optimization.
Yeah,
as well.
I would believe that. Like a number of years ago, 2014-ish, I had the opportunity to go to the Facebook campus and talk to some people there who were managing the data centers and talked about how they all worked and had a little bit of an interesting inside view of how that was going on behind the scenes. Mm. And this was well before, this current AI surge. But you could see there was already a lot of optimization and refinement and direction being driven by metrics and statistics and all these other factors that come into play when you need to serve, Instagram to 1 billion plus people all around the world.
Yeah. Well, it's exciting stuff.
Yes.
And hopefully their headcount reduction doesn't go into the AI world.
Yeah. And look, I don't know if it will. And a lot of these resets, these big firings, like they're taking it back to the trend. Like it's kind of where it was in 2021 plus maybe a little bit more. If we hadn't had this weird COVID mania, where would this sort of stuff have ended up?
Yeah, it's also the way a lot of these companies do it, as well as the firings aren't as big, and it's actually just attrition. People leave naturally and they don't replace.
Yes, which we're likely to see at a lot of these tech companies, especially as policies change and leadership changes and things like that. Like I can imagine for every person that the new Elon-led Twitter gets rid of, there'll be a dozen people who are like, look, I was on the fence about leaving anyway.
Yeah,
and
I'll take the redundancy.
This is not quite what I want to be doing. So
if you were thinking about leaving Twitter and you knew it was going through a sale, you'd be sitting with Elon saying it needs to be more efficient. You were thinking about quitting 6 months ago, you would have hung on for that redundancy package to now.
Yeah, I would imagine so. So it'll be interesting to see what the leaner, meaner versions of a lot of these companies look like. And you can see in Microsoft and some others that are less, I suppose, aggressive in their like headcount to revenue numbers, that they've weathered this a little better than Snapchat and Twitter and others.
Yeah.
I mean, Twitter's done well, but if Elon didn't buy it, I don't know where that stock would be.
Yeah. Well, you kind of gave me a segue 30 seconds ago, so I'll attempt to hook it back to bring it in. Speaking of policy changes, the US government under Mr. Biden has released a blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights. Very interesting. I did a quick search, couldn't find anything like it in the rest of the world that was like an individual country doing it. There's stuff from the UN kind of like commenting on it, and there's stuff from philanthropic and safety organizations, but this is the first time, and obviously a big government being the US government.
Yeah, definitely. So, while we've seen AI roadmaps and sort of, I guess, strategic documents around like why the company should invest in this industry, this is the first time I've seen a major piece like this, which, to clarify, an AI Bill of Rights, which the clickbait title did draw me in initially thinking, oh, we're about to treat AI the way we treat companies.
What is their definition of sentience?
Yeah, they're kind of a person for all intents and purposes and for the law, but that's not what this is. So what this is...
It's a human bill of rights.
Yeah, basically. It's like what rights should be afforded to the American people given the growing prevalence and reliance on AI as a technology. And a lot of it is about equality and making sure that like systematic biases that are probably in training data don't disproportionately affect those same marginalized populations when these models are trained. So, we've seen this in the past. There's been sort of judicial AI that's looked for predicting reoffenders in criminal cases, and it picks black criminals as potential reoffenders significantly more often because it had a heavily biased data set, even when the numbers don't back up that claim. Similar things around immigration and workplace screening and things have seen of gender discrimination, racial discrimination, and things like that, which, if this stuff is left unregulated, as we've said, it can cause a lot of harm.
Yeah. So it can exacerbate human biases, as we've talked about on 3 or 4 different episodes.
Yeah, exactly. And it can even create new biases of its own, just based on, not even reinforcing existing stereotypes, but like if there's groups in society that are very underrepresented and just don't make it into the training set, they can be considered, from the AI's point of view, so out of distribution, which is a term to basically mean looking nothing like anything we've ever seen before, that the results are just effectively meaningless. But at the end of the day, the AI has to give an output. So the output just becomes basically unpredictable and likely devolves into either a strong yes or a strong no in that very simple case.
And I'm going to give them 10 points for effort in this regard. Like, it's good to see them writing something out. It's good to see them thinking about it. I'm out on the fence as to whether it's going to do anything and how you actually translate this into like policy that will affect things. But it's look, thinking about it is better than not thinking about it.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, okay, there's probably a lot of factors that are contributing to the why now of this. I'm sure it's been in the works for a while, but like, sentiment around the use of AI for, content delivery and things like that. Sentiment around AI in healthcare and, disproportionately harming certain groups in society. Sentiment around should the copyrighted material that I produce be allowed to be used in AI training, and midterms means that this is probably a good time to start to get certain groups on side, especially, and there is a lot of merit to this, but if you're targeting minority groups in the population, or not even necessarily minority in the absolute number sense, but just like marginalized
Smaller
groups. And you can come out with statements like this, which says, look, we haven't forgotten about you. We know that this technology, if just left to the ultra wealthy and the ultra capitalistic, can be used a certain way, may get misused. That's probably a good way to remind people that you're thinking about them.
I actually was a little bit pessimistic. I was like, what models are they currently using on people that are about to be exposed to the public, and they have to point to something to be like, oh, yeah, we're already on top of this. Look, we made a mistake.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, one example where, something that I'm personally looking at the moment is trying to get a visa, not for myself, but for my wife, so that we can go to the US. The wait times are currently like, I don't know, depending where you look, like 4 months to 4 years long. And I'm sure there has been talk, if not tests, around can we process some of this stuff automatically? Yeah. And you can imagine where something like visa approvals could easily make people really angry.
I suspect biases could creep in there.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know. We'll see.
I think the only other interesting point that I came across was there was a section that was calling out a clear demarcation between human and automated services for people, and it was like a requirement that you needed to clearly show when it was an automated system being used, which I found very interesting. Of like, if you're chatting to a government agent, you can imagine they have the word AI next to their name tag when they're called Jennifer or whatever.
So I think this and one other point very related to this were quite interesting to me as well, is that like, I guess it begs the question of like how much of the output that you're interacting with needs to be generated by AI before it needs to say this contains AI. And you can think of
how automated is automated.
Food labels and all sorts of other stuff, like if it contains 99% organic ingredients and 1% inorganic ingredients because it's just got MSG or whatever, like how do you put these labels on these products? The other one was that it mentioned that people should have the option to opt out and use human services where possible. And I think much like, GDPR, which has great intentions but has ultimately just created like a bunch of buttons that say reject all, accept all,
it's just created a whole new set of Chrome plugins that automatically accept or reject every cookie for me,
I just think that like this is one of those areas where in principle it's like, of course, you should be able to opt out to a human version of whatever service you're engaging with. But it's like, well, what if that just makes running your entire business like fundamentally impossible? Because, the only reason this business model works is because we can use AI instead of people to do this. So, yeah.
Anyway, but I think like I interpreted that more as the government would have to do that.
Yeah.
And in that case, the government does literally have to cater for 100% of use cases, and so they need they need it to be able to provide it on an iPhone app, but also then they also need to be able to provide it for someone who doesn't have a telephone and uses mail. So that's the way I interpret it.
Yeah, that's fair.
And now I'm going to tee myself up for a segue as well, which I think what it didn't call out, and I think it'll be interesting, is when humans and AI start competing for resources, especially around, so for example, we're not in an energy shortage at the moment, but there's talks of it, prices are high, people are worried about the winter coming. There's been a few factors which has lessened that shortage over the last couple of weeks. But we're in a world where we might be in an energy shortage and prices skyrocket. What's going to happen when there's people wanting to train models, people wanting to use models, etc., and we're sitting in an energy shortage? And teeing myself, and there was no clear call out in this of we will preference humans over AI. Maybe that's too far ahead. Maybe that's too futuristic just yet, and we're not in that place. And maybe the free markets will solve all that stuff for us, and we're happy to let that. But
yeah, I mean, it's a tough one though. Again, it's like, should a human watching Netflix be preferenced over an AI assisting in surgery?
yes.
Okay. Well, cool. You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a good point, and I think we're going to see it in power.
Yep.
We're going to see it in availability of GPUs, and we're going to see it in internet bandwidth.
Yep.
Because a lot of these online GPU services, like Paperspace and Colab and all that sort of stuff, they've had to either add restrictions or shift their usage tiers because everybody suddenly goes, "Oh man, Stable Diffusion's cool. I'm going to spin up the exact same notebook," and 100,000 people do this, and play around with Stable Diffusion, and now suddenly all of this GPU bandwidth is being used up for this purpose. Whereas before, people were like, "I'll do an 8-layer dense neural network on MNIST, and it'll run on the CPU just fine." But yeah, also if we suddenly get this sort of AI generated content at a mass scale, there's Blue's Clues type or Teletubbies type content, and your YouTube looks very different to my YouTube because it's personalized for you, because it knows that you like blue flashing colors and I like red flashing colors. I think internet bandwidth will very quickly become a problem. I mean, even recently there was articles about how much of the internet is like Netflix and YouTube and stuff at any given time, and the richer this content gets, I think the more that's going to become a problem.
Yeah, like we're at the stages where things are growing so fast that like if you extrapolate growth rates on these things, it breaks. Like there was something like the amount of information that exists, if it keeps growing, it will like require every atom on the earth to be able to like the equivalent of every atom on the earth of like storage capability or something like that. Like
and like who ultimately is going to end up paying for this? Like, is it distributed across all users, or does it get disproportionately priced into corporate bandwidth versus consumer bandwidth? Because if I'm training DALL-E 6 and I need to scrape every image and video on the entire internet, pull it into a data center, and then cycle that around because I can't fit it all in memory, should you as a consumer who has an internet connection have your internet's price go up to pay for new internet infrastructure? I don't know, probably not. Seems a bit disproportionate. And we see in a lot of other industries, like we do get this sort of two-tiered delivery of stuff, like consumer gas lines and consumer power and things are often somewhat separate from like heavy industrial power and gas lines because you can't really price those or distribute those in the same way.
And we are going to see battle between business and consumer interests in the energy markets if we get a cold winter in Europe.
Yeah, definitely.
I think one thing that I was thinking about this week as well, and it's slightly related, but mainly I haven't talked to you about it yet, and I want to ask you now. But in the 1930s, we saw like Social Security come through, which was like essentially like a form of like floor on income for people, so that we could live in a world where people would have some form of security from the government. They pay the taxes, but if they end up unemployed, whatever, there would be some form of social security for them.
Yeah.
We then saw healthcare become, and these things have become like universal rights within countries. Not every country, but like Australia has it, America has it, and most of the Western world has it. And we saw social security become the universal right first. Then we saw healthcare, not in the US less so, but in Australia, healthcare is a right. I'm wondering whether like we saw the reason why these came in is countries saw these, governments saw these as an investment in the people that would ultimately help lift the country even further. When everyone was healthier, we're more productive, which makes everyone more productive, blah, 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 and richer and more, theoretically more happy.
Yeah.
You could make the same argument for energy, where like a base level of energy is required to exist properly and healthily in this country.
Yeah.
Soon you would be able to make the argument about connectivity and internet as well.
Yeah.
And then the next one would be compute as well. Are we going to end up in this world where like first it was social security, then it was health, then it'd be energy, then it would be connectivity, then it'd be compute as a universal basic right. Education is another one I should have mentioned in there as well. for these countries.
Yeah, it is interesting to think about, like, do we have a sovereign compute capacity that people can access, and do you have welfare computers? I mean, there's computers in public libraries and things like this. I think the difficult thing, because this space moves so quickly, is, and I'm not a politician, nor do I have any political, education, but in my head, it immediately jumps to, is it better to build sovereign compute capacity or give people money and let them interact with the free market, and so that we're not, we don't buy 50,000 iPhone 6s to distribute to those most in need, and then in 2045, people are like, they don't even make plugs for this anymore.
But I'm talking more at like, if you take that out of it, because there is definitely like a basic level of things that would provide that to people. So like, the example would be each household gets X, like, internet connection and X number of bits per year or something like that. Like you get water, like you get sewage, like you get electricity. But would we make this basic right?
I mean, you pay for sewage, you pay for water.
Would we at some point go, this is so valuable that we're not going to make people pay for it? And we believe that, like, as a country, if we invest in this by not making people pay for it, it would produce more for the world because we're more connected, we're more healthy, we've got more energy, whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, it could happen, definitely. I think an interesting place...
I want a yes or no from you.
I think given the infinite magnitude of time, yes, it will happen, but I'm not making bets on
infinite magnitude of time and infinite possibilities and infinite simulations.
But what I do think is interesting there is that, like, at the end of the day, somebody's got to foot that bill. And where sovereign wealth funds of the future may become very interesting is, like, can we build a Australian compute capacity that either indirectly by just like, hey, we'll lease GPUs to literally anyone that will pay, and we'll maintain this as a public service, as an export. We can export GPU hours, which is less interesting and not one that we can compete on. Or is it, let's build a sovereign intelligence in the form of AI and use that to generate wealth that feeds back into a sovereign wealth fund that is then used to say, like, hey, look, we got this AI and it basically, like, did the job of all of these previous services that were, government agents before. So, like, we don't have a tax department anymore. It's just all AI. But that generates a ton of money for us. So we put that into a wealth fund, and now everybody's a little bit better off. I don't know. It's a hard one because it's like the utopian version of it. Yeah, fuck yeah. It's like, yeah, everything for everyone. Like the Star Trek of the future. It's like, man, we're going to work on a spaceship and just cruise around and meet aliens. Yeah, go for it. Whatever. We got enough stuff that you can do that. The obvious dystopian counterpart to that is like, oh yeah, Australia is now Amazon down under, and Europe is now
Snow Crash style, where like
the connected countries of Google Incorporated. So I don't know. It's too big a topic.
Anyway, we people will get the segue. We're not going to talk about AI energy consumption. You'll figure it out.
That's the longest segue
ever. So we came across an article this week which talked about how in the news recently it's been Bitcoin's share of energy consumption. It's been operating, it jumped up to about the 1% level of world energy consumption. I don't know whether it was power consumption or whether it was actual energy consumption or whether it was electricity consumption, probably 1% of electricity consumption. So we're like verging on the size of like Netherlands or something in terms of electricity consumption for the mining, for cryptocurrencies, mainly across Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Yep.
And this article goes, we're sending the grid and the world's power into a dangerous place with how quickly cryptocurrency and AI is growing. And we're going to talk about the AI aspect, but I will make one comment on, they put this graph in it, and we'll share all this in the show notes as well. And it's cryptocurrency's growth of energy consumption over time. And, it's split into Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all others. And Bitcoin and Ethereum are slowly ticking up. And at some point, I didn't realize Ethereum was more energy consumption than Bitcoin, but apparently it is according to this graph. And Ethereum has now done their, what do they do?
They merged to proof of stake.
They've moved to proof of stake, and we actually saw a bit of a dip in the energy consumption there, which is good to see. Bitcoin's still traveling up pretty slowly. They're a little bit closer. But recently, the all other coin energy consumption has literally gone to basically zero. It's just dropped off the edge of the planet here, which is
Not surprising.
Not surprising, seeing what's happened to the value of those. But what we're here to talk about is the energy consumption for training the biggest neural networks in the world. So there's a graph in this which gets all of the neural network, some of the bigger models that we've seen, and actually misses quite a few. So we did a few back of the envelopes, but good example there is GPT-3. And it shows that GPT-3 took about 10,000 megawatt hours to train. And just for reference, the world consumes about 24 million megawatt hours of energy, and I'm assuming electricity in this situation, per year. So what we're talking about there is 0.004%, which is not insignificant. And according to this article, it's about the size of what Ghana and Kenya and Estonia consume each year. So, it's a bit of power.
Yeah, it definitely is a bit of power.
And the other takeaway from this graph that we are both looking at now, and obviously will be in the show notes, is that time is on the x-axis, and things are growing pretty quick. GPT-3 is at 10,000 megawatt hours in 2020, but if we look down at 2014, something called overfeed, which I don't know what it was about 0.1. So less than 6 years ago, and we've increased by a factor of 1 million to train a neural net. Now, obviously these things are not apples and apples to compare, and we'd have to dig into what that means, but there is a definite upward tick in up and to the right curve within this graph here.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we'll see this trend continue for some time. I'm sure there's work being done on the pure energy efficiency side of these things, but I think we'll hit before we run out of power, we'll probably hit an infeasibility point in this, in that I think GPT-3 was something 100,000 GPU hours or something like that.
Yeah, 100 to 200 you said, yeah.
Which is okay, if you can get 1,000 GPUs, that's 100 to 200 hours, that's still 10 days of training time. And you're not going to be able to get GPUs forever. You can probably keep getting more and more for a while, but I don't think the Earth is going to run out of power faster than we can run out of GPUs, or faster than we can run out of patience. Because if it suddenly if GPT-4, if we don't get any more GPUs and it takes 3 years to train, people will get sick of that pretty quickly.
Yep.
And if we suddenly need all the GPUs that humanity has ever created, well, then that's just impossible as well.
Yeah. So it's probably safe to say in the next decade, power and energy is unlikely to be the bottleneck on these models.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it won't be the rate limiting step. But one trend that we talked about last week that I think we'll continue to see as these models get bigger and bigger is the sort of Lego brick evolution of AI, in that, the work that went into GPT-3, if GPT-4 is a brand new architecture from scratch, no similarities, it's a complete reinvestment of this energy. But it's how can we treat this energy not as a expended resource, but an embedded resource or invested resource?
That was a CapEx, not OpEx.
Exactly. So, with Clip, which is the sort of contrastive text-to-image embedding setup that's used in a lot of these text-to-image models. So we have one trained version of that, or several trained versions of that people reuse. So we invested once in training this, and we have that as a resource that can be then reused in other systems. But if you wanted to, for some stubborn reason, train your AI from scratch, you'd end up repaying that cost. So it'll be interesting, I guess, as those costs, 100,000 GPU hours is not something I can afford or you can afford. But if I have a trained version of GPT-3 and I want to use that as the front part of some other model, I can take that and I can make use of that, which I think is going to, in a sort of free market economic incentive type sense, force us down that pathway a little bit faster.
So the article kind of loses us a little bit because it suddenly very quickly ends up in a Skynet. AI is going to kill us. We're competing for resources place. And I'll quote from this: carbon-based organisms are fighting over access to energy for 4 billion years, and now silicon-based organisms are coming, and in less than 60 years. The only way we can convince corporations, investors, and consumers to give up on AI and crypto is to make a better technology. Which gets a little bit doomsday-y, and we also think is a little bit incorrect, because it basically makes the justification that because you can put $1, you can spend $1 in energy and get $3 out with cryptocurrency at the moment, that those investments mean people are going to forever be like earning that return, which is just not going to happen. There's going to be, like, the market will like reach an equilibrium at some point.
Absolutely. And I think this is like saying that, cars that run on ethanol fuel are competing with us for corn. It's not like the cars are like patrolling the cornfields and running over people that are trying to take their corn. It's like, no, human beings have reallocated some resources somewhere else, and it's more profitable to do so. The AI is not buying GPUs and running itself. OpenAI is buying GPUs to meet the needs of OpenAI shareholders. It's a little sensationalist for my taste, I think.
Yeah. I think the takeaway from this article is that, wow, AI and crypto are growing quite quickly as a form of energy consumption.
Yep.
We should probably pay attention to this because the grid doesn't have that much spare capacity in it. And very quickly, it could be taking energy away from human beings in certain ways that we're not comfortable with. Or pushing prices to places that essentially do the same thing.
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think if you were in London and let's say all of Stability's GPUs were in London and they're training Stable Diffusion 2.5 while the rest of the country is like slowly freezing, you'd be pretty pissed.
Yeah.
Although, maybe we could... All right, Stability, I've got it. I've got your revenue option.
Oh, my God.
Stability needs places to train its GPUs.
Yep.
London needs heat. GPUs get fucking hot. So let's pull out all the gas infrastructure across Europe and replace it with banks of GPUs in people's homes.
You know how Kevin Rudd...
I'm kidding, by the way.
You know how Kevin Rudd sent us a $900 check? Well, he didn't send me. I wasn't old enough at that point. Kevin 07. But
I missed out on it too for something.
Yeah, I was 17. Why doesn't Rishi, new overlord of the United Kingdom, why doesn't he send everyone a GPU?
Yeah. 4090s for Christmas keeps the UK toasty.
Yeah.
That's what we need, people. That's what we need. Stable Diffusion means stable UK.
There's a pun in there with Brexit.
Yeah.
We'll get back to you.
We'll get back to you. But
wait, you wait there. It'll be funny. But anyway,
I mean,
I think it's a very interesting time. I've ranted to you many times about this, that the energy grid, the energy sector is a very interesting time over the next 10 years as we're trying to push all transport to energy over the next like
to
10
electricity.
years. Yeah, to electricity, sorry.
Yeah.
And we've got to do a little bit with industry as well. And now we're adding in this new industry called AI and compute, which is like, growing relatively quickly. And if it keeps going, is going to consume a large spot. And there's no indication that compute is slowing down. And the consumption of compute is slowing down as more things go cloud, more things go, and more models get produced and models get bigger and bigger and bigger.
For sure.
The electricity space is in for a wild ride over the next 10 to 20 years because it's a it's a long infrastructure cycle to build this.
Yeah, we are electrifying everything. I mean, like another industry like synthetic food products, like synthetic meat and synthetic dairy and all that sort of stuff. Like, say what you will about its taste or long-term, viability, but if suddenly all of the cows now need to be plugged into the wall, that's also going to do take a big hit on our energy grid.
Yeah.
It'll. I don't know.
I said the TLDR was invest in copper.
Yeah. Get ready for a nuclear future, hopefully. But see episode 2 or 3 before we were an AI podcast about why that might be slower than we think.
Yeah. Alrighty. Bonus content.
Yep. Let's wrap this one out.
Dick pic detectors.
Yeah. So this one, Bumble released an AI model that detects unwanted photography.
Lewd images.
Was
the official corporate terms.
Which is basically like unsolicited nudie pics. And let's be honest, they're mostly from men.
Yeah. Their advertising. Their advertising just had the eggplant emoji in it saying no more lewd pics or no more pics.
Yeah. And the idea here is like not to remove that capability from Bumble. I'm sure it's like at least let you
want to see
click to accept, opt in.
This could contain a dick. Would you like to engage?
Exactly. And I'm sure there are people out there having fun with like, all right, let's test this algorithm. Let's get a literal eggplant.
So this is my biggest question from it was, it said it's 98% accurate. Like, First off, AI community, can we stop releasing stats like 98% accurate? Like, let's go. Let's give me at least two of these.
No, but to their credit, they said there was also no point which had a significant trade-off between precision and recall.
Okay.
So, I mean, the big thing I think that is here is like, yeah, you can be 98% accurate by getting all the non-dick pics right or getting all the dicks right. Yeah, we did this with ibises and ducks a long time ago. I think in the case of Bumble, it should be pretty obvious that you're better off flagging a picture of somebody holding a sausage as potentially lewd than you are of, erring on the other side of caution.
I also, the other question I had as well is like, are they opening themselves up to like being sued for like shaming certain types of bodies because they didn't consider them a certain part? Like,
maybe. I don't know. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I opened the GitHub repo, had to scroll through the code and sort of read the implementation details, but this is not a model that I downloaded and tested. And I didn't test it.
If anyone has, leave a comment, but just text.
But yeah, verbal comments only. I don't know, makes sense. I'm sure, this online dating space is probably full of more and more and more AI products as it goes along, like matching algorithms and all this other sort of stuff. So, yeah, look, it makes sense. It's interesting. It was mainly here because it was funny.
Yeah, as you can see, we've gotten a lot more giggly as soon as we mentioned the word dick pic. And
yeah.
Why did they open source it though?
I don't know. Just cause.
I wonder whether it was marketing.
Yeah, I'd say it's primarily marketing because I don't think that the competitive advantage of was it Bumble?
Bumble, yeah.
Who did it? Like, we have AI generated dick pic protection? Like, you can't win.
I was actually wondering whether like most of their user base was in San Fran or something like that, and they're like, oh, that makes sense.
Maybe. I mean, it makes me think though, like, how long ago would somebody have been like browsing the Bumble jobs page and think like, you know what, these machine learning positions seem like a job to apply for. It seems like such a strange, I mean, I don't know, whatever. Anyway.
Hey, you're moving to the US. You don't know what you're going to be.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows?
Chief Dick Pic Officer.
CDPO. Yep.
I put another one in there, but we're done.
Yeah, we'll talk about it next week.
It was a bigger thing. It was a bigger one.
Yeah, good. Very good. Well, that wraps up episode 23 of the High Output AI. I was going to say High Output AI podcast. Thank you all very much for listening. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Consider joining the Discord, leaving a comment, sharing with your friends, doing all of that sort of stuff. If there's any interesting articles and stuff you want us to talk about, any videos you'd like us to make, probably now the best place to put it is Discord.
Yep. Discord is in the show notes. If you want to leave any comments complimenting Elliot and I, saying Elliot looks like Andrew
Scott,
and I look like Jude Law, we're really happy to keep getting those comments. That's very nice of you people out there.
Yep. I guess so.
Actually happened.
Yeah, I mean, anything else you want to plug before we
wrap
up for the day?
No. A few more videos coming out next week. We got to do something on superintelligence before I forget everything in that book.
Yes, yeah, we both read Nick Bostrom's book, so we'll do a little bit of a summary of that one and contextualize it.
You gonna do any live streams this week? Putting you on the spot here.
I should do. Yeah, I've been working on a bigger project that I have been playing this game of. I'll just do a bit more work and then it'll be ready to live stream. But I really should just stream some of the work because I think that's what people care about. So. Yes, it'll be an extension to some of this UNet work. It should be quite fun. So I'll get some streams together next week or maybe even over the weekend. So look out for those. Otherwise, see you next time.
Bye-bye.